All right, Fernal Blessings, back with another video. All right, before I begin, quick announcements. If you're interested in signing up for any of the classes I offer, since that's one of the most frequent emails I get, the way you want to do that is to go to the official Primordial Chaos Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. That's patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, and tier 3. That's the way you want to go. Tier 3 is the tier you want to join to get in on the classes, the 3 private classes I do every month on Patreon for Patreon members only, and the group ritual we do together at the end of the month. If you are interested in a spiritual consultation or a spiritual reading, various different readings I offer: telepathic demonic readings, Egyptian oracle readings, Santa Muerte readings, shadow work readings, as I've said many times, is a great reading to do at any time, particularly when you're looking for guidance and maybe you don't know what direction you should be going in as far as doing ritual work, what you should be doing. Very good for if you got something like that going on, but something that should be done in general. Deity readings to see what spirits walk with you, to strengthen your relationship with those spirits. Again, not to worship them, but to make that connection stronger and for you to grow and evolve on this path of self-mastery. All right. The 6th annual Journey of the Black Adept Conference is in full effect. You can sign up now and register to either attend in person, which includes, it's a 4-day event, includes a meet and greet on Thursday night, October 19th. We'll be meeting at the Flashback Diner, having a little bit of fun, doing a little throwback 80s, 90s retro. It's going to be a little fun event. Friday and Saturday, going to be all-day classes and workshops and speakers from 9 to 4 p.m. And then in the evening on both nights, we meet back up later in the evening to do group ritual work. And then after the ritual work is complete, we will go out to eat, have fun, and socialize and kick it for a little bit. And then on Sunday from noon to 4 p.m., I'll be doing a question and answer class to finish out the 4-day event. So if you would like to attend in person, or you can also attend virtually, which will give you access to the 3 days of classes, the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday class. You'll get access to the classes, the workshops on Friday and Saturday, and the question and answer class on Sunday, and you'll be able to interact also with everybody that's there live like we've done the last few years. So either or, if you're interested in attending live or virtually, shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com, and I will send you that information for readings, consultations, the conference, whatever. Just be specific in your email. Also, remember, all the new content and some existing content is being uploaded and is on the Primordial Chaos podcast, which can be found on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. The direct link to the podcast is in the description box of this video. All right, having said that, you see the title. I want to talk about Lucifer and the activation of the pineal gland. Okay? We know Lucifer, we know the term Luci in Latin is light, the light bearer. Okay? What are we talking about when we're talking about light? Well, let's talk about a little bit first about the pineal gland and how it's activated. Okay? First, we know what can cause, when we say activated, let's just say it's not your pineal gland, your third eye, your brow chakra, your ajna, the different names for it in different systems, is not functioning and activating. It could be calcified, right? The calcification process happens for a multitude of reasons. As I stated before, you're not receiving correct information. It could be, dietary issues. It could be health. All of these things affect the function of the pineal gland. The pituitary gland, which assists in that. And these things can cause disruptions. Remember, I'm just going to give because the nature of these videos, these are quick 20-30 minute tutorials. So I'm going to go through a lot of these key things as quick as I can based on the time that I have. So when certain things are affecting it, you're not receiving that light or intellect that activates the pineal gland. Okay, because it is light. Let's talk about what kind of light are we talking about. Well, we know the light, when we talk about everything that exists in the universe in the form of energy, that also is a form of light. You are a form of energy. When you hear me say over the years that you are a being of light and energy, I'm not saying that in some new age spooky way. When you look at science and creation and what you're composed of, you are composed of what we're calling these energy or light particles. Okay? Your pineal gland is literally like an antenna or a receptor that receives these beams of light or particles or energy that communicate a certain level of consciousness or awareness to your whole being. When that is blocked, and as I said before, you have to look at it like almost the old radio dials on the old radios or the old car radios where you had to turn the dial, right? We all remember, well, it depends on your age, right? Not all of us. But we all remember, if you're in my age bracket, my generation, remember the old dial radios, whether you had a boom box or the old car radios, you had to turn the knob and just sometimes you had to tune it, play with it to get the right frequency. Well, that's how your pineal gland is when it's not linked into that vibrational frequency, okay? So when there's things blocking the direct path to it, okay, it can't receive those messages of consciousness, awareness, or what we're calling light or so-called intellect. Okay? Now Lucifer, who is the great awakener that brings that light, and it's like this is one of the main reasons why we connect and work with the energy of Lucifer. Lucifer is not what most people think. Now again, if you're watching this video and you're super religious, if your mind is corrupted through religious dogma to who and what Lucifer is, then you're not going to get this video, because the only rebuttal and comeback or opposition you will have to this is going into some religious aspect of what you've been programmed through Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or monotheism as a whole to what Lucifer is. So it's not what people think it is on the surface. It's the same when a Luciferian, or what we're terming a real Luciferian, I'm not talking about your internet Luciferian and all that indoctrination that's out there on the internet where people think it is. And I've always said many times before, people have all this inside knowledge of secret societies and all these, like they claim they do, they must be a member. And if not, and you're just getting your information from trolls on the internet, then you don't know what you're talking about. Okay? And that's what most people are doing anyway. That's just the reality of it. A Luciferian, a true practicing Luciferian, sets out on a path to obtain illumination or light. And Lucifer being the key point to obtain that illumination or light. So we connect with Lucifer to activate the pineal gland in the form of activating that consciousness or that divine awakening that you hear everybody talking about, right? Because a lot of Luciferians will be in agreement and they'll say that Lucifer represents the activation of that light. That light represents the consciousness. As it's said in many places, one must go into the darkness to obtain the light. That light is the knowledge or the intellect. And this is where the pineal gland comes into play. An illuminated person who's on this path and now reached the degree of an illuminated one, that pineal gland is now activated. And it's done in the form of connecting with Lucifer as that light. Now, there's some deeper sciences in the actual sigil of Lucifer that has become so popular over the years. The sigil that most people, now there's different masks of Lucifer. There's different forms of him in those masks of the adversary that carry different sigils. But Lucifer, the main sigil of Lucifer that you will see as a whole, whether it's on the internet and in most books, we know it represents a multitude of things on the surface. The union of the divine masculine and feminine energies. When you look at it closely, you can see the outline of a chalice. It's the connecting of all these things, the above and the below, activating the divine within. But also, if you turn the symbol and you face it with the bottom portion of the rays coming out to you, it also shows you the direct path that light, one, goes through your eyes or enters your eyes, which, let's get in that in a second if I have time. But it shows the direct path, how that light or consciousness enters and gets to your brain, to the pineal, right? It's the direct path. There's more deeper esoterical occult breakdowns of the Lucifer sigil outside of just some of the stuff we know on the surface. Your eyes, right, as I said before, you are seeing the fastest moving colors through what they call the spectrum, right? To give you an idea how this light travels, okay? Now, I've said this before in the past over the years. When you look at the sky, for an example, and it shows that it's blue, right? And if you've ever been on I'm sure a majority of us have been on, unless you have super fear of planes and you never got on. But for those of us, or the many of us that have taken a flight and we've been up, elevated over a body of water, and if you ever notice, depending on the conditions, is it clear sky? Is it overcast? Is it partly cloudy where the sun's going in and out? Depending how the sun is reflecting off of the water and the type of conditions, the water can appear blue, it can appear green, it can appear gray, etc. Why is that? Is the sky really blue? Is the grass, for an example, really green that you see, etc., etc.? The reality is this: the reason why blue comes through first in the sky on a clear day is because blue is the fastest moving color through the spectrum. When you look at the colors on the spectrum, and I'm going to do something in relation to Santa Muerte and the 7 colors on the spectrum, but I'll save that for another time. But you see certain colors as they manifest. The way you're processing that, the way your brain is receiving that light, is how fast they move through that color spectrum. So the sky appears blue because it's the fastest moving color. Now, depending on how the sun reflects that light, now that's why I use the example, if you're in an airplane, for an example, above a body of water, depending on the angle, how the sun is reflecting the light, and how those colors are moving through the spectrum, that's why from certain angles, the water can appear greenish, it can appear bluish, it can appear grayish. It's just how the sun is reflecting the light and how fast those colors are moving through the spectrum of the prism. Well, how you absorb light or consciousness is the same on a spiritual level. So when you perceive things, right, your eyes is gonna view it. Based on what your eyes is viewing, your brain will process the data. Now that could be, it could be a multitude of ways. It could appear to be right, it could appear to be wrong, but it's based on your level of perception. This is why I say there's really no such thing as right or wrong. Even though you might hear something to you that could appear completely wrong, you have to take it into account that's the way the person perceived it. Okay? So it's how we register and acknowledge this knowledge. I mentioned something on a couple videos back, to give you an example. If the story, there's a lot of esoterical, when you leave the religious faith dogma, as I told you before, you can go through the Bible and there's a lot of esoterical occult breakdowns of certain stories, right? So in relation to what I'm talking about, I want to talk about, run back quick to something I mentioned a few videos back about the story of Jacob's ladder and Jacob, right? If you go into the 33rd chapter of Genesis and the 28th chapter of Genesis, it gives you the whole story. It mentions the name of the place that Jacob wrestled with so-called God and met him face to face was Pineal. And as I said before, you can go look it up. I may have the spelling off by a letter or two. The spelling, I believe, is P-E-N-N-I-E-L or P-E-N-I-E-L, somewhere in that area. But it's clearly phonetically sounds the same as pineal. It says that this encounter takes place at a place called Pineal. Some say pineal, but phonetically we see somebody left traces and roots in there for those that have an open eye, right, to see. So when you read the story, right, and people that are religious that take it literally, you can't explain it from a literal perspective, because it says he ascended. He's having this spiritual experience, ascending this ladder, right? Now the key to it is in the name he's given after this, right? Well, as I told you before, when you back up, even when you go in, I mentioned in that same video, when you look at the painting that Michelangelo did on the Sistine Chapel with God and man, and then the two fingers touching, if you really impose the shape of a brain over that, that's representing a brain. What that's trying to show you, that picture, is your higher self. It's talking about you connecting with your higher. It's the lower self meeting with the higher self to activate the awareness of the real you, right? The intelligent self, the genius. Look at it. Just superimpose the brain over that image, and you will see it's the design, literally, of a brain. This is what I'm trying to say. These fuckers been knowing for years what they've been doing, even if it's in religion. Now, as I said before, as you know, the Catholic Church, if you saw some of the recent posts I put, you see the scales and the symbol of Baphomet and the staff that the Pope is holding, the current Pope right now. The Catholic Church is seriously into occult ritual stuff. It's obvious. They're connected, even from the Black Madonna and Child on down. Don't believe that shit you see on the surface. You got to pay attention to the imagery that they put out, the positions, the pose, the hands. All this is done strategically for a reason, because it's communicating to those whose eyes really open. It's not for the religious folk that they're asleep and that they're caught up in faith and belief and they don't see it. So let me be clear on that, okay? But this story is a key integral part with this character called Jacob in the Bible, because it represents you. So Jacob says he wrestled with the Lord, or God. And it's wrestling up the ladder. As I said before, Jacob's ladder represents the spine, right? It represents the spinal cord, because it's literally a staircase to the stem of the brain. And as I told you before, the stem of the brain is where the activation of where neuromelanin is, or the superhighways that clear the pathways for the consciousness or light. So he was wrestling to connect really with his higher self. This is your story. And then when you look at the front part, you're dealing with the activation of the chakras. But when you look at the back, that ladder represents that spinal cord to the stem of the brain, because we know the stem of the brain, where that neuromelanin or those superhighways are that activate that consciousness. And again, if you're not clear on what neuromelanin is, not neuromelanin. The neuromelanin is for the external pigmentation of the skin. The neuromelanin coats every organ in the body: livers, kidneys, the heart, the lungs, you name it. There's traces of it everywhere. It's almost needed for survival and overall function and abilities. It's one of the most important integral elements that one needs to exist. Okay? So when you get to the brainstem, and then we start talking about the cerebellum, the hippocampus area, the brain, where that part of your brain is responsible for receiving what some would say spiritual visions, spiritual messages, etc. So this whole Jacob's ladder story is the activation of that consciousness, or that pineal gland. It's showing you the process. The wrestling is all symbolic, because he had to wrestle with God, right? Because it was his mortal self trying to merge into the divine union of what we all are when we reach our potential divine state, or God or goddess. Again, when I say God or goddess, yes, not that mythological faith-based crap, not no God of, because the question posed, God of who and what? You would say that in regards to if you are claiming to be some God like of the Bible, or some other God of some specific tribe, culture. No, we're talking about the God or the master over yourself, right? The real you. And when you embrace that aspect of yourself, you are now saying, I am an acting, responsible, intelligent, thinking being in control of my path, my destiny, and the course that I'm going to take in my life. Okay, so it's the activation or the awakening of the true real self And the pineal gland now is, when it's able to receive that light, you become what they call a whole light being, for an example. This is why Jesus also referred to in the Gospels, when the body becomes full of light, the eye becomes one. He was talking about the activation of the third eye or the brow chakra, whatever you want to call it, the ajna, whatever you want to refer to it as. This is essentially what Lucifer represents. And this is why in the previous video, when we were connecting the pentagram and Baphomet and how I made it clear, Baphomet is not a deity. I just want to make that clear. It's a symbol. It's a symbol that is connected to the left-hand path in the occult, but I made it clear in that video, we use it as a symbol of activation, like a sigil and what it represents. And I connected some of the elements of Baphomet to what, for an example, Christ consciousness or Jesus represented, right? Not the literal aspect of the literal aspect of the man Jesus and the man Baphomet. Now, if you personally believe that they are real, that's your personal business. But I wasn't focusing on that. I made that clear in the video. I was focusing on what they represent and the similarities. And you have to see the esoterical occult breakdown, right? Are you going to find that in any book, literally the way I explained it? More than likely not. I'm breaking down the personal understanding that I got, and for you to look into it further. I'm not telling you to accept it, but you can't deny there's just common sense similarities there, right? So Lucifer, I made the correlation, and this so-called Jesus character, they're attributed the same attributes also. Both represent an activation of this light or awareness, right? They're both referred to as the son of the morning star. There's that connection with light. You even have Jesus referred to in Malachi chapter 4, where they attribute that quote to Jesus. It's not really, because it's talking about the literal son. It says the son of righteousness, but not the S-O-N son. It says the S-U-N son. So here we have this correlation of light in nature and creation, including the sun or the illumination of it. And as I said before, I grew up Catholic as a child and an adolescent to very early teenage, like 13 maybe, 12, 13, until I really started leaving that shit alone. And then going back, revisiting it from a cult perspective. As I said before, they connect this aspect of the sun, S-U-N son, the S-O-N son, light, intellect, and knowledge. There is a regular practice that the Catholic Church does. It's called the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. For those that are not Catholic, or those that just may not be knowledgeable and know what that is, let me explain. Most churches they either do this in the main area of the church for smaller churches, but if it's a bigger church, most churches have a chapel, a smaller section in the church where they do services or rituals like this, and basically what it does on certain days, they lay this thing out called the monstrous, right? You probably maybe even seen this on EWTN, you've seen the Pope do it, or you might have seen it on one of them channels, where it looks like literally a sun with rays coming out of it. They put the communion wafer, the Eucharist or the host in the middle, which was supposed to represent Christ. So we have the body of Christ in the center of this monstrous with rays emitting from it, and there's this long gold base. You will also notice ritualistically when the priest handles it, the altar boy will put a cape type of shawl on him where he covers his hands. He never touches it directly with his hands, and he lifts it up, holds it, uses it with that. Now, when they open this ceremony or service that they do, or whatever, really it's a ritual if you really want to know my opinion. Behind the altar in a Catholic church, you'll see what they call the tabernacle, which is supposed to be symbolic also of the tabernacle in the Torah, but now the tabernacle or the bread of life is supposed to represent Christ. So you'll see, even during Mass when they distribute communion, they get all the other communion wafers, everything's stored in that tabernacle behind the altar, and you always see in a Catholic church, there's always a flame that's kept lit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's encased in what they call a red cemetery light. It's a white candle, and it's always behind the altar. And it's always to represent that Christ consciousness. It's supposed to always represent the presence of God. They give you different breakdowns of it. And it's an eternal flame that's kept lit all the time. You can walk into any Catholic church and just look behind the altar. There will always stay that one candle lit in that cemetery lamp. And they just replace it when it burns out with another one. It's the continual flame. Okay? But you will see them go out behind the altar from the tabernacle, grab the communion wafer, place it in this monstrous. There's this opening ritual. They take the frankincense and myrrh. There's some opening prayers. They incense the monstrous, this relic. The priest is raising it up. They do these prayers. Then he places it there down, keeps it on the center of the altar. Okay? It stays on the center of the altar. It stays exposed all day to a certain amount of time. And then there's another ritual at the end of the day to put it back where it was, to officially close it out. It's called the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. It's really nothing but acknowledging the divine within. It's connecting, quote unquote, what people call Christ consciousness or illumination, or coming into your own as far as being linked to divinity. That's what we are. And it's representing also your connection with nature, the S-U-N sun. Because when you look at this monster, just look at it, it's nothing but the ball of the sun with the rays emitting from it. So what they're telling you, there's a correlation between the S-U-N sun, the S-U, and the S-O-N sun. There's a correlation between Lucifer, the light bearer, who's an activation of that great light, right? Because the sun, even in ancient Egypt, represents great states of consciousness, especially when you get into the sun god Ra, or the triad of the sun god, right? This is all connected to illumination, to light, to activation of your pineal gland. So for those that need to get a better understanding of what this path is really about, minus all the rhetoric and bullshit and conspiracy shit and sensationalism on the internet, I'm trying to give you more of a metaphysical, occult understanding of what we do and what we're connecting with and how we're working this, and what you're thinking Lucifer isn't what you think it is. Trust me when I tell you. If you think it's some character on the hot sauce bottle with a pitchfork, you're spooked out. Okay? So I just wanted to go through this tutorial to show you. And again, when you get time, read that story again in Genesis 28 and 33 about Jacob. Read it closely, though, this time. Now, remember, as I said in the previous video, which I forgot to mention here, remember, after that incident, according to the biblical story, Jacob's name was changed after that. He was no longer referred to as Jacob or Yaqub, right? His name went from Yaqub to Israel. He was now referred to as Israel. Isra means to ascend to El. He ascended to El, or God. Now, it says he met God face to face. What it's really meaning, he met his higher self. He has now came into the realization that he is a God. That's how we look at it from an esoterical occult perspective. The literalist will look at it like, oh, he literally connected with this, but you get my point. I'm speaking to you more from an occult esoterical perspective. He now connected with the true and the higher self. So his name no longer is Yaqub, it's Israel, because he ascended that ladder to El, right? So these are just some things to think about your journey, while you're on this path, while you're here, to remove a lot of the spookism, especially, unfortunately, the occult or the left-hand path, especially in reference to Lucifer, can become spooked out, just like it can become ostracized, a lot of negativity. It's the same thing that can happen with any other religion or dogma. It happens in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and other paths. Right? It is our job to clarify things, right? First and foremost for ourselves, because we're on this path for ourselves, first and foremost. Your goal is supposed to be to master yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. That's why you should be here. To be the best you can be overall. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. That's why I'm here. And in doing that, the fact of the matter is, not everybody's going to be in agreement with your stance or your perspective, and who gives a shit? You're not here doing this for anybody. The main thing that's important, you need to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what direction you're going in. If that's clear, and you're getting that communication, you're getting that knowledge and that intellect is being processed correctly to the pineal, and you're able to carry out. This is what I mean when I say, for over the years, what good is it if you're reading all this information, but you can't apply it? Those that can't apply it aren't able to process it. So there's a lot of people that can regurgitate shit, and they're good at quoting shit from books. They're good at just regurgitating the explanation of things, and it looks on the surface, oh man, that person's so deep and they're so heavy. But that's not what I look for. I say, okay, that's cool. That person, they can retain a lot of shit. They know a lot of stuff. I look at the living example that they are. Is that reflecting in the everyday aspect of who they are, their life, and everything they got going on around them? But if you got all that knowledge and I'm looking at you and you're a hot mess on all levels, then that tells me you ain't processing this shit. You may be reading a lot of shit. You may be regurgitating a lot of shit. You may be retaining a lot of shit. But I'm not seeing it as an example in your everyday life. Now, if I'm seeing both, hey, I give you due respects. But if both ain't there, then there's a disconnect. There's a discord there that you're not clear on. So that's how this works. Lucifer simply is the key to receiving that light or intellect and activating that pineal. All right. Hopefully this short tutorial helped you. This video. Try to shoot maybe another one or two today at some point. Again, if you need to reach out to me to sign up for my classes, I do 3 private classes every month on Patreon. So the official Primordial Patreon page is patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Tier 3 is the way to go. Sign up to Tier 3. That'll give you access to the 3 private classes I do on Patreon every month, including the group ritual at the end of the month we do together. If you need to reach out to me for a spiritual consultation or a reading, or you want more information on the 6th annual Journey of the Black Adept Conference, shoot me an email at khnum19@gmail.com. Also, remember, all this new content and some existing content is being uploaded and is available on the Primordial Chaos podcast, which is available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. The direct link to the podcast and my contact information and everything I've been talking about is in the description box to this video. All right? Other than that, we'll talk soon. Fraternal blessings. We out.